Before we start our story, a quick note to all our listeners at Woo English. We're here to help you learn English through stories, using clear and simple sentences. Your journey through language learning is important to us, and we hope our stories not only entertain, but also help you improve your English skills. If you enjoy this story and find it helpful, please don't forget to press the like button. Your likes encourage us and help us create more content for you, and we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share your thoughts, what you've learned, or any questions you might have. Let's embark on this learning adventure together. Now, let's dive into our story. Chapter 1. The Wilderness Calls. In the early 19th century, the American wilderness was a vast, mysterious land. It was filled with dense forests, towering mountains, and endless rivers. This was a time when the West was truly wild, and only the bravest dared to explore its depths. Among these daring souls was Hugh Glass, a man who had become a legend in his own time. Hugh was not a man who sought fame or fortune. He was driven by a deep love for the wilderness and an unquenchable thirst for adventure. With his rugged appearance, marked by years of living outdoors, and his eyes that seemed to hold countless stories. Hugh was the epitome of a frontiersman. He had faced the wilderness with nothing but his skills and his wits, and he had survived. One day, as Hugh was trading furs in a bustling frontier town, he heard talk of a new expedition. A fur trading company was organizing a journey into the uncharted territories of the West. They were seeking men who knew the wilderness, men who could navigate its dangers and bring back valuable furs. The promise of unknown lands and untold adventures called to Hugh like a siren's song. He knew he had to be part of this expedition. The next morning, Hugh found himself standing before the leaders of the fur trading company. They were seasoned traders, men who had seen many winters, but even they looked upon Hugh with respect. When he expressed his desire to join the expedition, they did not hesitate to accept him. Hugh's reputation as a skilled trapper and his knowledge of the wilderness were well known. He was exactly the kind of man they needed. As the day of departure approached, Hugh prepared himself for the journey. He checked his equipment, a sturdy rifle, a sharp knife, and a trap for catching animals. These were the tools of his trade, and he knew how to use them well. He also packed provisions, though he planned to live mostly off the land, hunting and foraging as he went. The morning the expedition left, the air was filled with a sense of anticipation. A group of men, some experienced frontiersmen like Hugh and others greenhorns eager for adventure, gathered on the edge of the frontier. They were about to step into a world that few had seen, a world full of dangers and wonders. Hugh looked out at the wilderness stretching before them, a land untouched by man, and felt a surge of excitement. This was where he belonged, in the vast, untamed wilds of America. The expedition set out, moving into the dense forests and towards the towering mountains in the distance. The journey would be long and fraught with peril, but Hugh felt no fear. He was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The expedition moved slowly, the men burdened by heavy packs and the unfamiliar terrain. They followed ancient trails made by animals and Native Americans, paths that wound through the forest and across clear streams. Hugh led the way, his keen eyes spotting signs of passage and potential dangers. He taught the less experienced men how to move quietly, how to listen to the sounds of the forest, and how to find food and water. As they ventured deeper into the wilderness, the beauty of the land revealed itself. They saw vast plains stretching to the horizon, forests that seemed to go on forever, and rivers that cut through the landscape like silver threads. They encountered wildlife, majestic deer, and fearsome bears, and at night they heard the howl of wolves echoing in the distance. But the wilderness was not just a place of beauty, it was a place of danger. Storms could arise without warning, turning rivers into torrents and paths into quagmires. The men had to be constantly vigilant, watching for signs of hostile Native American tribes or rival fur trappers. Hugh's experience was invaluable, guiding them through these challenges with a calmness that inspired confidence in his companions. As the days passed, the expedition faced hardships. Food sometimes became scarce, and the physical toll of the journey weighed heavily on the men. But Hugh remained undaunted. He pushed forward, driven by the desire to see what lay beyond the next mountain or forest. His spirit, unbroken by the wilderness, served as a beacon for the others. One evening, as they camped by the side of a river, Hugh sat by the fire, looking up at the stars. The vast expanse of the sky reminded him of the wilderness they were exploring, endless, mysterious, and full of possibilities. He thought about the journey ahead, the unknown lands that awaited them. It was this, the promise of adventure and discovery, that had called him to the wilderness. And so, Hugh Glass, the experienced frontiersman, ventured forth into the American wilderness. With each step, he wrote his own legend, a tale of survival and adventure that would be told for generations. The wilderness called to him, and he answered, not with words, but with the courage to explore the unknown. Chapter 2. A Perilous Journey. As the expedition led by Hugh Glass ventured deeper into the wilderness, the journey became increasingly perilous. The landscape was unforgiving, with steep mountains that seemed to touch the sky and dense forests that allowed little light to penetrate. The men faced the rugged terrain with determination, but it was clear that each step took them further away from the world they knew. The challenges began with the terrain. The mountains were steep and treacherous, forcing the men to find narrow passes that were often blocked by fallen trees or rock slides. In the dense forests, the underbrush was thick, catching on their clothes and scratching at their skin. Rivers that looked calm from a distance proved to be fast-flowing and difficult to cross, their icy waters numbing their limbs. But it wasn't just the land that tested them. The weather became a formidable opponent. Sunny days could suddenly turn into violent storms, with thunder rolling across the sky and lightning striking the tall trees. Rain poured down in sheets, turning paths into mud and making it difficult to light fires. At night, the temperature dropped sharply, and the men huddled together for warmth, their breaths visible in the cold air. Wildlife was another constant threat. The forests and plains were home to animals that were not used to humans. Bears roamed the woods, their presence signaled by upturned soil and broken branches. Wolves howled in the night, their eyes glowing in the darkness. Even the rivers held danger, with snakes slithering along their banks and in the water. However, perhaps the most unnerving challenge was the knowledge that they were not alone. Native American tribes lived in these lands, and their feelings towards the intruders were unknown. Sometimes the men would find signs of their presence, a distant campfire, footprints by a stream, or arrows stuck in a tree. The expedition knew they had to tread carefully, respecting the land and its people. Despite these challenges, Hugh Glass led his men with confidence. His knowledge of the wilderness was invaluable, teaching them how to read the signs of the land and weather, how to find food and water, and how to stay safe from predators. But even Hugh's skills were tested. One day, as they were crossing a particularly difficult mountain pass, a sudden rock slide caught them off guard. Rocks and debris cascaded down the slope, and the men scrambled for cover. When the dust settled, they found that one of their pack horses had been injured, and some of their supplies were lost. It was a sobering reminder of the dangers they faced. Another time, they awoke to find a thick fog had enveloped their camp. Visibility was reduced to a few feet, and the familiar landscape seemed alien and menacing. That day, they barely made any progress, their senses heightened for any sound or movement that could indicate danger. Despite these hardships, there were moments of beauty and wonder. They came across a valley filled with wildflowers, their colours vibrant against the green of the grass. They saw herds of buffalo roaming the plains, a sight few men from the east had ever seen. At night, the sky was a canvas of stars, more brilliant than any they had seen before. But these moments were fleeting, and the expedition pressed on. Each day brought new challenges, and each night they fell asleep exhausted, their bodies sore, but their spirits undeterred. They had set out to explore the unknown, and they were determined to succeed, no matter what the wilderness threw at them. As they moved forward, Hugh Glass remained a source of strength for the men. His calm demeanour in the face of adversity, his ability to find a way when it seemed there was none, inspired them to keep going. They began to understand that the wilderness, for all its dangers, also offered something invaluable, the chance to prove themselves against the raw forces of nature. The journey was shaping them, not just as explorers, but as men. They learned to face their fears, to rely on each other, and to respect the land that challenged them at every turn. The expedition into the wilderness was not just a perilous journey, it was a test of their courage, their resilience, and their will to survive. As they settled down one evening, the fire crackling and the stars beginning to shine above, there was a sense of camaraderie among the men. They shared stories of the day's challenges and talked of the journey ahead. There was an unspoken understanding that they were part of something greater than themselves, a venture into the unknown that would test them to their limits. But for Hugh Glass, the journey was more than a test. It was a calling. The wilderness, with all its beauty and danger, was where he felt most alive. And as he looked out into the night, he knew that no matter what lay ahead, he was ready to face it. The perilous journey was far from over, but Hugh Glass and his men were determined to see it through, to write their own stories in the uncharted wilderness of America. Chapter 3. The Grisly Encounter. Hugh Glass, always vigilant and aware of the dangers of the wilderness, led his expedition with a steady hand. There were times, however, when he would scout ahead alone, ensuring the path was safe for his men. It was on one of these solitary ventures that Hugh's story took a dramatic turn. The day had begun like any other. The sun rose, casting a golden light over the dense forest. Birds chirped, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Hugh moved quietly, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger or a path worth taking. He was deep in the wilderness now, far from the familiar trails known to trappers and fur traders. As he made his way through a particularly dense thicket, Hugh heard a rustling sound. Instinctively he paused, listening closely. The wilderness was full of sounds, but Hugh's experienced ears could discern the normal from the ominous. This time, however, before he could react, a massive grizzly bear emerged from the brush. The grizzly, startled by Hugh's presence, roared menacingly. Hugh knew he was in grave danger. Grizzlies were known for their strength and unpredictability. His rifle was in his hands in an instant, but he knew that a single shot might not be enough to stop the charging beast. Hugh aimed and fired, but in the heat of the moment his shot only wounded the bear. Enraged, the grizzly closed the distance between them with terrifying speed. Hugh tried to reload, but there was no time. The bear was upon him. What happened next was a blur of fur, claws, and teeth. Hugh fought with all his might, using his knife to try and fend off the massive animal, but the grizzly's strength was overwhelming. Hugh was thrown to the ground, the bear's massive weight pinning him. He felt sharp pains as the bear's claws and teeth found their mark. The struggle seemed to last an eternity, but in reality, it was over in minutes. The bear, perhaps satisfied that it had neutralized the threat, eventually wandered off, leaving Hugh badly wounded and barely clinging to life. Lying on the forest floor, Hugh was in a dire state. His body was battered and bruised, numerous wounds, and his breaths were shallow and pained. The wilderness, which had been his home and his passion, had now become the scene of his most desperate moment. Despite the agony, Hugh's mind was clear. He knew he needed to survive, not just for himself, but for his men. They depended on him, and he would not let them down. But as he tried to move, pain like he had never known coursed through his body. Every movement was torture, yet Hugh's will to live was stronger than any pain. He began to drag himself towards a nearby tree, a slow and excruciating journey. Reaching it felt like an impossible achievement. He propped himself against the trunk, trying to assess his injuries. It was evident that without help, he would not survive long. Yet, help was miles away, back with the expedition. Hugh knew he needed to make a plan. He needed to stop the bleeding, to find water, and somehow signal his men. But as he tried to rise, darkness crept into the edges of his vision. The effort was too much. His body could not sustain the exertion. In that moment, Hugh made a decision. He would not give up. Drawing on a deep well of strength, he focused on surviving. He tore strips from his already tattered shirt, using them to bandage his worst wounds as best as he could. He crawled, inch by inch, to a small stream he had crossed earlier, his throat burning with thirst. As night fell, Hugh was alone, his situation dire. The cold seeped into his bones, and he trembled uncontrollably. Pain was his constant companion, a reminder of his will to survive. He thought of his men, of the expedition, and of the unexplored wilderness that had been his life's passion. These thoughts, these memories, fueled his determination. Hugh Glass, the experienced frontiersman who had faced the wilderness with confidence, was now engaged in his greatest battle, a battle for survival. The grisly encounter had left him on the brink of death, but his spirit remained unbroken. In the silence of the forest, with the stars as his only witness, Hugh made a silent vow. He would survive. He would return to his men, and he would continue to explore the vast, untamed wilderness that had been both his challenge and his home. The night passed slowly, filled with pain and reflection. Hugh's situation seemed hopeless, but as the first light of dawn broke through the trees, it brought with it a glimmer of hope. Hugh was still alive, and as long as he had breath in his body, he would fight to survive. The story of Hugh Glass's grisly encounter is a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure in the face of overwhelming odds. It is a dramatic chapter in the life of a man whose love for the wilderness was matched only by his will to survive. Chapter 4. Left Behind. In the wild heart of the American wilderness, Hugh Glass found himself in a situation more challenging than any he had faced before. After the terrifying encounter with a grizzly bear, he was left injured and barely able to move. His expedition team, a group of men he had led through the dense forests and across towering mountains, now faced a difficult decision. The leader of the expedition, a man named Captain Henry, gathered the group. They looked at Hugh, lying on the ground, his injuries severe. The wilderness was a harsh and unforgiving place, and the expedition had to move quickly to survive. Captain Henry knew that Hugh's chances of survival were slim. After a long and heavy silence, he made the tough decision to continue the journey without Hugh. It was a decision none of them took lightly, but they believed it was the only way to save the rest of the group. However, Captain Henry could not leave Hugh without any hope. He asked for volunteers to stay behind with Hugh until he passed away. 2 men stepped forward: John Fitzgerald, a seasoned trapper known for his tough exterior, and a much younger man, Jim Bridger, who was still learning the ways of the wilderness. They were tasked with the grim duty of staying with Hugh until the end. The rest of the expedition packed their belongings and continued on their journey, leaving behind Hugh with Fitzgerald and Bridger. The 2 men made a small camp near a stream, where they could get water and try to make Hugh as comfortable as possible. They built a fire to keep him warm and fend off wild animals. Days passed, and Hugh's condition did not improve. He was unable to eat, and his injuries seemed too severe to heal. Fitzgerald and Bridger found themselves in a difficult position. They had limited supplies, and staying with Hugh meant risking their own lives. The wilderness was full of dangers, and every day they stayed, they were putting themselves at greater risk. Fitzgerald grew impatient. He believed staying with Hugh was a waste of time, that Hugh's death was inevitable. Bridger, although young, felt conflicted. He had grown to respect Hugh during their journey, and felt it was wrong to leave him to die alone. However, Fitzgerald's will was stronger, and he convinced Bridger that they had no choice but to leave Hugh and catch up with the rest of the expedition. Before leaving, Fitzgerald and Bridger did something unthinkable. They took Hugh's rifle, knife, and equipment, leaving him defenseless in the wilderness. They believed Hugh would not need them anymore, and justified their actions by telling themselves they needed the equipment to survive. With heavy hearts, they left Hugh lying by the fire, his eyes closed, breathing shallowly. They started their journey to catch up with the rest of the expedition, leaving behind signs to show they had stayed with Hugh until the end, as they had been tasked. Back at the camp, Hugh lay still. The fire began to die down, and the sounds of the wilderness filled the air. But Hugh was not yet ready to give up. Despite his injuries and the betrayal by Fitzgerald and Bridger, a spark of life still burned within him. As the first light of dawn touched the sky, Hugh opened his eyes. He was alone, without his rifle, knife, or any supplies, but he was alive. Hugh knew he faced an almost impossible journey. He needed to find water, food, and somehow make his way back to civilization. But more than that, he felt a burning need to survive and to confront the men who had left him to die. Chapter 5. Betrayal. In the vast and wild landscape, Hugh Glass lay injured and helpless, John Fitzgerald and Jim Bridger, the two men left behind to watch over him, faced their own struggle. The wilderness was unforgiving, and every day was a battle for survival. As time passed, fear and impatience began to cloud their judgment. Fitzgerald was the first to voice what both of them had been thinking. "He's not going to make it," he said, looking down at Hugh with a mixture of fear and frustration. "We're just wasting our time here, and every moment we stay, we're risking our own lives." Jim Bridger, young and less experienced, felt torn. He had admired Hugh for his strength and knowledge of the wilderness. The thought of leaving him behind didn't sit right with him. However, Fitzgerald's words echoed in his mind. The wilderness was a dangerous place, and they had their own lives to think about. Their supplies were running low, and the constant threat of attacks from animals or hostile groups weighed heavily on them. The longer they stayed, the more dangerous their situation became. Fitzgerald argued that they had done all they could for Hugh, and it was time to think about their own survival. One cold morning, as they prepared a small breakfast over the fire, Fitzgerald made a decision. "We're leaving today," he announced. Bridger looked at him, surprised and uncertain. "But what about Hugh?" he asked. Fitzgerald looked around the dense forest, the fear evident in his eyes. "Hugh's already gone. We need to survive, and we can't do that if we stay here any longer." Despite Bridger's hesitations, Fitzgerald's will was stronger, and the fear of dying in the wilderness was a powerful motivator. Before they left, Fitzgerald and Bridger faced one last dilemma. Hugh's rifle, knife, and equipment were valuable tools for survival. Fitzgerald reasoned that Hugh no longer needed them, and that taking them would increase their chances of making it back to civilization. Bridger was reluctant, but the harsh reality of their situation left little room for sentiment. With heavy hearts, they gathered Hugh's belongings, leaving him with nothing but the clothes he wore. It was a decision that would haunt Bridger, but in the moment, survival was their only thought. They looked at Hugh one last time, his breathing shallow and weak. Then, they turned their backs on him and started their journey back to rejoin the expedition. The forest seemed to close in around them as they left, the weight of their betrayal heavy in the air. As they walked, the silence between them grew. Bridger couldn't shake the feeling that they had made a grave mistake. Fitzgerald, however, was focused only on getting back to the expedition. He believed they had no other choice, and in the wilderness, tough decisions had to be made. The decision to leave Hugh behind and take his equipment was a turning point. It was an act of betrayal driven by fear and the overwhelming desire to survive. The wilderness had a way of testing men, bringing out both the best and the worst in them. For Fitzgerald and Bridger, the fear of death outweighed their loyalty to Hugh. Back at the camp, Hugh lay alone. The fire had gone out and the cold crept in. But even in the face of abandonment and betrayal, the spark of life still burned within him. Hugh Glass was not a man to give up easily. Despite his injuries and the bleakness of his situation, he was determined to survive, to make it back to civilization, and to confront the men who had left him for dead. Chapter 6. The Will to Survive. In the silence of the wilderness, where the only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of animals, Hugh Glass lay on the cold ground. Abandoned and alone, his situation seemed hopeless. However, something inside him refused to give up. As he regained consciousness, a fierce determination took hold of him. Hugh slowly opened his eyes, the events leading up to his abandonment flashing through his mind. He remembered the bear attack, the pain, and then the faces of Fitzgerald and Bridger as they left him behind. Realizing he had been abandoned without his rifle, knife, or any supplies, Hugh felt a surge of anger. But more than anger, he felt a will to survive, to prove them wrong, and to seek justice for what had been done to him. Despite his severe injuries and the immense pain, Hugh began to assess his situation. He knew staying where he was meant certain death. He needed to find water, food, and shelter if he was going to survive. With no tools or weapons, he would have to rely on his knowledge of the wilderness and his own cunning. The first task was to find water. Using all his strength, Hugh dragged himself towards the sound of a nearby stream. It took hours, and the journey was excruciating, but the thought of survival pushed him forward. When he finally reached the water, he drank deeply, the cool liquid giving him a small boost of energy. Next, Hugh needed to find food. Without his rifle or knife, hunting was out of the question. Instead, he turned to what the wilderness offered: berries, roots, and plants. He used his knowledge of the forest to identify what was safe to eat, slowly gathering enough to sustain him. For shelter, Hugh knew he needed to protect himself from the elements and wild animals. Finding a small cave, he crawled inside. It wasn't much, but it offered some protection and a place to rest. Inside the cave, Hugh took stock of his situation. He was weak, injured, and alone, but he was alive, and as long as he was alive, he had a chance. The days turned into weeks, and slowly Hugh began to regain some strength. His wounds started to heal, and he adapted to his new reality. He fashioned simple tools from stones and sticks, improving his chances of survival. Hugh also began to plan. He knew he needed to find the expedition or make his way back to civilization. The thought of confronting Fitzgerald and Bridger drove him. He wanted them to know he had survived, to face the consequences of their actions. But Hugh's journey was not just about survival or revenge. It was a test of his spirit and his will to live. Each day presented new challenges, but with each challenge, Hugh grew stronger, both physically and mentally. The wilderness, which had almost claimed his life, was now his teacher, showing him the depths of his own resilience. Hugh Glass's story of survival against all odds is a testament to the human will to live. Abandoned and left for dead, he refused to give up. He fought for every breath, every step, driven by a desire to survive and to seek justice. His journey was long and fraught with danger, but Hugh Glass was no ordinary man. He was a survivor, a fighter, and his story would become a legend in the annals of the American frontier. As Hugh lay in his cave, looking out at the forest that had been both his adversary and his savior, he knew the road ahead would be difficult. But he also knew he had already overcome the impossible. With determination in his heart and the will to survive guiding him, Hugh Glass was ready to face whatever lay ahead. His journey was far from over, but he had taken the first steps on a path that would lead him out of the darkness and back into the light. Chapter 7. A Test of Endurance. Hugh Glass knew that, to survive, he must find help. With this goal in mind, he began a grueling journey across the wilderness. Every step was a test of his strength and willpower. The land was vast, and dangers lurked around every corner. But Hugh was determined. He would not let his spirit be crushed by the challenges he faced. The first part of his journey involved navigating through dense forests. The trees seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky, and the thick underbrush made progress slow. Hugh relied on wild berries and edible plants for food. He had learned to identify these from his time in the wilderness before. Each berry was a small victory, a sign that he could survive another day. Water was essential, and Hugh made sure to stay near streams and rivers. The sound of running water became a guide and a comfort on his lonely journey. However, he also had to be cautious. Water sources could lead him into the territories of hostile Native American tribes or bring him face to face with wild animals. Hugh had a deep respect for Native American territories. He knew that crossing into their lands uninvited could lead to conflict. So, he carefully navigated around the areas he knew were inhabited, using natural landmarks as guides. He had learned some of these territories during his time with the expedition, and from his own previous travels. Wild animals were another constant threat. The wilderness was home to bears, wolves, and mountain lions. Hugh had no weapons, making him vulnerable. However, he used his knowledge of animal behavior to avoid them. He stayed downwind so his scent would not alert predators, and made wide detours around areas where he saw signs of bears or wolves. Despite these precautions, there were close encounters. Once, Hugh stumbled upon a wolf pack feeding. He froze, making no sudden moves, and slowly backed away until he was out of sight. Another time, he awoke to find a mountain lion watching him from a distance. He remained still until the lion lost interest and left. These moments were terrifying reminders of the dangers of the wilderness. Hugh's journey was not only a physical test, but a mental one as well. Loneliness weighed heavily on him. He missed human contact and longed for conversation. The wilderness, with all its beauty, could also feel like a vast prison. To combat this, Hugh talked to himself, recounting stories from his past, and planned what he would say to Fitzgerald and Bridger when he found them. These conversations with himself kept his mind active and his spirit alive. Despite the hardships, there were moments of beauty that lifted Hugh's spirits. He witnessed stunning sunrises and sunsets, saw the majesty of the mountains, and marveled at the clear, starry nights. These moments reminded him that there was beauty in the world, even in the toughest of times. Hugh's journey was a testament to human endurance. He faced hunger, thirst, danger, and loneliness, but with each step he grew stronger. He learned to listen to the land, to move with caution and purpose, and to trust his instincts. The wilderness had been his undoing, but now it was his teacher, showing him the way to survive. As days turned into weeks, Hugh's resolve never wavered. He knew that giving up meant death. So he pressed on, driven by the desire to live and to confront those who had abandoned him. His journey was a remarkable demonstration of what one man can endure when pushed to the limits. Hugh Glass's story of survival is a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit. Faced with overwhelming odds, he refused to surrender. His journey through the wilderness was a test of endurance, a battle against the elements, and a fight for survival. In the face of adversity, Hugh Glass showed that it is possible to overcome, to endure, and to emerge stronger. Chapter 8. The River of Hope. After many days of walking through the dense forest and navigating the challenging terrain, Hugh Glass reached a turning point in his journey, a wide river that stretched as far as the eye could see. This river, with its flowing waters, presented a new path for Hugh. It was a path that could lead him to safety and, eventually, to the men who had betrayed him. Hugh knew that travelling by river could be faster and less exhausting than walking through the wilderness. However, he also understood the dangers. The river was unpredictable, with strong currents and hidden obstacles beneath its surface. Despite these risks, Hugh decided to build a raft. It was a decision driven by necessity and the hope that the river would guide him closer to his goal. With no tools, Hugh had to rely on his resourcefulness to construct the raft. He gathered driftwood and fallen branches from along the river bank. Using vines and strips of bark, he tied the pieces together as best he could. It was a simple raft, barely large enough to hold him and a few supplies, but it was sturdy. Hugh looked at his creation with a sense of accomplishment. It was a testament to his determination to survive and to face those who had wronged him. Before launching the raft into the river, Hugh took a moment to plan his journey. He knew he had to be cautious, to navigate the river's challenges carefully. He also needed to conserve his strength. The journey ahead would be demanding, and he couldn't afford to take unnecessary risks. With the raft ready, Hugh pushed it into the water and climbed aboard. The current caught the raft immediately, pulling it downstream. Hugh used a long branch as a makeshift paddle, steering the raft away from rocks and through the calmer waters. The river was wide, and the shores were a blur of green as he passed. It was a new perspective on the wilderness that had been both his adversary and his ally. As he travelled down the river, Hugh faced new challenges. There were times when the water was so swift that he struggled to control the raft. Rainstorms made the river swell, and the wind whipped the surface into choppy waves. Hugh held on tightly, using all his skills to navigate through these difficult conditions. But there were also moments of calm, when the river flowed gently, and Hugh could let the current carry him forward. During these times, he allowed himself to rest, conserving his energy for the challenges ahead. The river also offered Hugh new opportunities to find food. He was able to catch fish using a simple spear he made from a branch. The fish were a welcome change from the berries and plants he had been eating. They gave him strength and nourished his body, helping him recover from the weeks of hardship. As days turned into nights, Hugh continued his journey down the river. The stars and the moon guided him, and the sound of the water became a constant companion. He grew to understand the river's moods and rhythms, adapting his strategies to match the conditions he faced. The river became Hugh's hope, a moving path that offered a chance to find help, and eventually to seek justice. It was a silent ally in his quest for survival, carrying him through the heart of the wilderness toward an uncertain future. Hugh Glass's journey on the river was a pivotal chapter in his story of survival. It demonstrated his ability to adapt, to face new challenges, and to use the resources available to him. The river, with all its dangers and opportunities, was a testament to the unpredictable nature of the wilderness. Yet, Hugh navigated its waters with determination and resilience, driven by the will to survive and the desire to confront his betrayers. The River of Hope was not just a physical journey for Hugh, it was a journey of inner strength and determination. It showed that even in the most challenging circumstances, there is a path forward, a way to move beyond betrayal and pain. Hugh Glass's journey on the river is a reminder of the power of hope and the unbreakable human spirit. Chapter 9. A Chance Encounter. As Hugh Glass travelled down the river on his makeshift raft, his body grew weaker. The journey was long, and despite finding some food along the way, it was not enough. Hugh knew he needed more help to survive, but he was alone, far from anyone who could offer assistance. One day, as the sun began to set, Hugh's strength finally gave out. He collapsed on his raft, unable to move. The current carried him slowly, and as darkness fell, Hugh lay there, drifting in and out of consciousness. It was during one of these moments of faint awareness that Hugh felt his raft stop moving. He heard voices, but he couldn't open his eyes to see who they were. Hands gently lifted him, carrying him away from the river. Hugh wanted to resist, to ask where they were taking him, but he had no strength left. He slipped back into unconsciousness, trusting his fate to the strangers. When Hugh awoke, he found himself in a place he did not recognize. He was lying on a soft bed of furs inside a tent. The air was warm, and the sound of a gentle fire crackled nearby. Hugh tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced him back down. A figure approached him, a Native American woman with kind eyes. She spoke softly, offering him a bowl of something warm to drink. Hugh drank, and though he did not understand her words, he felt a sense of safety. Over the next few days, Hugh learned that he had been found by a friendly Native American tribe. They had seen his raft stuck on the bank of the river and rescued him, bringing him to their camp to recover. The tribe's healer, an elderly man with a deep knowledge of medicinal plants, treated Hugh's injuries and illnesses with natural remedies. Slowly, Hugh began to regain his strength. The tribe was kind to Hugh. They shared their food with him, and in return, Hugh shared his stories. He told them about his journey, the bear attack, and how he had been left for dead by his companions. The tribe listened, offering him comfort and understanding. As Hugh grew stronger, the tribe taught him new survival skills. They showed him how to hunt using a bow and arrow, how to fish in the river, and how to identify medicinal plants. These skills were different from what Hugh had known, and he was a quick learner. He was grateful for their help, knowing that these new skills would aid him in his continued journey. One day, the tribe's chief spoke to Hugh. Through gestures and the few words they both understood, the chief explained that it was time for Hugh to continue his journey. The tribe had helped him as much as they could, but Hugh had a path he needed to follow. The chief gave Hugh a bow and arrows, a gift to help him on his way. Hugh felt a mix of sadness and gratitude as he prepared to leave. The tribe had become like a family to him, offering him kindness and support when he needed it most. He thanked them in his own way, promising never to forget their generosity. As Hugh set out once again, he felt stronger and more confident. The tribe had given him a second chance at life, teaching him valuable skills and showing him kindness in a world that had seemed so harsh. He knew the road ahead would still be difficult, but the encounter with the tribe had renewed his spirit. Hugh's journey was far from over, but the chance encounter with the Native American tribe had changed him. He was no longer just a man fighting for survival. He was a man with a purpose, armed with new knowledge and skills, and a deep appreciation for the kindness of strangers. Chapter 10. Back on the Trail. After the time spent with the friendly Native American tribe, Hugh Glass felt stronger and ready to continue his journey. They had nursed him back to health and taught him valuable skills. Now, he had a clear goal: to find the expedition and confront the men who had abandoned him. With a bow and arrows given to him by the tribe, Hugh felt more prepared for the challenges ahead. He knew the journey would be difficult, but he was determined to make it. The kindness and generosity of the tribe had given him hope and strength. Hugh set out early one morning, just as the sun was rising. The air was fresh and the world around him seemed full of possibilities. He walked through the forest, following the direction the tribe had shown him. His steps were steady, his eyes alert for any danger. As he travelled, Hugh used the skills he had learned from the tribe. He hunted small animals for food and found fresh water streams. He was careful to avoid the territories of hostile groups and kept an eye out for wild animals. The wilderness was still a dangerous place, but Hugh felt more confident in his ability to survive. Each day, Hugh covered as much ground as he could. He climbed hills and crossed rivers, always moving forward. At night, he would find a safe place to rest. Sometimes he would light a small fire, careful to keep it hidden from any unwanted eyes. Other times, he would sleep under the stars, wrapped in the furs the tribe had given him. As the days passed, Hugh's resolve only grew stronger. The memory of being left behind fueled his determination. He thought about Fitzgerald and Bridger often, wondering what he would say to them when he found them. The betrayal still stung, but Hugh was focused on reaching his goal. One afternoon, as Hugh was walking through a particularly dense part of the forest, he heard voices. He stopped, listening carefully. It was a group of men, speaking in English. Hugh felt a surge of excitement. Could it be the expedition? He approached cautiously, staying hidden behind the trees. As he got closer, Hugh realized it was not the expedition, but a group of fur trappers. He watched them for a moment, debating whether to show himself. Finally, deciding it was worth the risk, Hugh stepped out into the open. The trappers were surprised to see him, a lone man emerging from the forest. Hugh explained who he was and asked if they had seen the expedition. The trappers shared their own stories, telling Hugh they had not seen the group he described, but had heard rumours of them passing through the area weeks before. The trappers offered Hugh food and a place by their fire. They were rough men, but they treated Hugh with respect. They talked late into the night, sharing stories of the wilderness. Hugh listened, learning what he could about the land and its dangers. In the morning, Hugh thanked the trappers for their hospitality and set out once again. He was closer now. He could feel it. The expedition could not be far ahead. Days turned into weeks as Hugh continued his search. The wilderness was vast, and there were times when he wondered if he would ever find the men who had abandoned him. But he did not give up. The desire to confront Fitzgerald and Bridger, to make them see the man they had left for dead, drove him forward. Hugh's journey was a testament to his strength and determination. Despite the betrayal and the hardships he had faced, he pressed on. The wilderness had tested him, but he had emerged stronger, with a clear purpose. Chapter 11. The Winter Cave. As Hugh Glass continued his journey, the air grew colder, and the leaves on the trees turned from green to shades of orange and yellow. Winter was approaching, and Hugh knew he needed to find a safe place to stay during the cold months. The wilderness was challenging enough without the added danger of freezing temperatures. One day, while exploring a dense forest, Hugh discovered a cave. It was hidden away, partially covered by thick bushes, but it was large enough for him to enter and stand up in. Hugh inspected the cave carefully, making sure it was safe. There were no signs of bears or other animals using it as a den. This cave, Hugh decided, would be his shelter for the winter. Knowing the importance of being well prepared, Hugh set about making the cave as comfortable and secure as possible. He gathered branches and leaves to create a bed. He also collected large stones to build a fire pit at the entrance of the cave. This fire would be crucial for keeping him warm and for cooking food. With his shelter in place, Hugh focused on gathering food. He used the bow and arrows given to him by the Native American tribe to hunt. He was able to take down small animals, such as rabbits and birds. These hunts not only provided him with meat but also with fur, which he used to make extra layers of clothing and blankets to keep warm. Hugh also gathered edible plants and roots, as well as nuts and berries. He knew from his time with the tribe which plants were safe to eat and which to avoid. He stored his food supplies inside the cave, carefully managing his resources to ensure they would last through the winter. As the first snow fell, covering the ground in a blanket of white, Hugh felt a sense of accomplishment. He had found shelter, gathered food, and was as ready as he could be for the winter. The cave was not just a place of refuge. It was a symbol of Hugh's resilience and his ability to adapt to any situation. Throughout the winter, Hugh kept himself busy. He worked on improving the inside of the cave, making it more comfortable. He also maintained a strict routine, keeping himself physically and mentally sharp. Each day he would check his food supplies, collect firewood, and keep the fire burning. The long winter nights were a time for reflection. Hugh thought about his journey, the hardships he had faced, and the men he was determined to find. The fire provided warmth and comfort, its flickering light casting shadows on the cave walls. Hugh felt a deep connection to the wilderness around him. It had been both his adversary and his ally, teaching him valuable lessons about survival and about himself. Despite the isolation, Hugh did not feel alone. He felt a part of the natural world, a survivor in the vast wilderness. His experiences had changed him, but they had also strengthened his resolve. As winter passed and the first signs of spring appeared, Hugh knew it was time to continue his journey. He packed his belongings, taking one last look at the cave that had been his home. It had provided him with shelter and safety during the coldest months, allowing him to survive and prepare for the next stage of his quest. Chapter 12. The First Confrontation. After months of searching and surviving in the wilderness, Hugh Glass finally had a chance to face one of the men who had abandoned him. The cold of winter had passed, and with new determination, Hugh followed the trail that he hoped would lead him to the men. One sunny morning, Hugh spotted a figure in the distance. It was one of the men who had left him behind, John Fitzgerald. Hugh's heart raced with a mix of anger, relief, and anticipation. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the chance to confront Fitzgerald and make him answer for his betrayal. Hugh approached quietly, making sure not to alert Fitzgerald until he was close enough to talk. Fitzgerald, caught off guard, turned to see Hugh standing there. The surprise on Fitzgerald's face turned quickly to fear. He had never expected to see Hugh Glass alive again. "Hugh Glass," Fitzgerald stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "You're supposed to be dead." Hugh stood tall, despite the hardships he had endured. "You left me to die," he said, his voice steady and firm. "But I survived." The tension between the two men was palpable. Hugh could see the fear in Fitzgerald's eyes, and part of him wanted revenge for the pain and suffering he had gone through. However, as he stood there, facing the man who had betrayed him, Hugh realized something important. His quest for revenge had given him a purpose, a reason to survive the impossible. But now, standing in front of Fitzgerald, Hugh knew that killing him would not change what had happened. It would not heal his wounds or erase the memories of his struggle. Hugh looked at Fitzgerald, seeing him not just as a betrayer, but as a man who had also been trying to survive in the wilderness. "You thought I was dead, and you left me," Hugh said. "I survived the wilderness, the animals, and the cold. And I survived to tell my story." Fitzgerald lowered his eyes, unable to meet Hugh's gaze. He knew he had done wrong, and the weight of his actions was heavy on him now. "I'm sorry," he muttered, the words barely audible. Hugh took a deep breath. The anger and the need for revenge that had driven him for so long slowly began to fade. He realized that surviving his ordeal and confronting Fitzgerald was enough. It proved that he was stronger than the betrayal and the wilderness. "I won't kill you," Hugh finally said, "but you have to live with what you did. That will be your punishment." Fitzgerald nodded, understanding the gravity of Hugh's mercy. Hugh turned away, leaving Fitzgerald behind. As he walked away, Hugh felt a sense of closure. He had faced one of the men who had abandoned him, and he had chosen to spare his life. It was not forgiveness, but an acknowledgement that revenge was not the answer. Hugh's journey had been long and filled with challenges, but in this moment of confrontation he realized that his survival and his ability to face Fitzgerald without seeking revenge were his true victories. He had proven to himself and to the world that he was not a man to be underestimated. Chapter 13. The Journey Continues. After his confrontation with Fitzgerald, Hugh Glass felt a mix of emotions. Part of him was relieved to have faced one of the men who abandoned him, but another part of him knew his journey was not over. There was still one more man, Jim Bridger, who had left him behind. Hugh's resolve to find Bridger and confront him was strong, but now it was tempered with the lessons he had learned about survival, forgiveness, and what truly mattered. Hugh continued his journey through the wilderness, his mind often reflecting on the incredible experiences he had endured. He thought about the bear attack that had nearly taken his life, the betrayal that had left him for dead, and the kindness of strangers who had helped him heal. Each of these experiences had taught him something valuable about the strength of the human spirit and the power of determination. As he travelled, Hugh faced new challenges. The wilderness was always changing, and with each day came new obstacles to overcome. Rivers swollen with rain made crossing dangerous, and steep mountains tested his strength and endurance. Yet, Hugh met each challenge with the resilience and resourcefulness he had developed over his months of survival. One day, as Hugh was navigating a particularly dense forest, he came across a bear. Memories of his near-fatal encounter flooded back. But this time, Hugh felt different. He was no longer defenseless. Using the skills he had learned from the Native American tribe, Hugh managed to avoid a confrontation with the bear, moving quietly away until he was safely out of sight. It was a small victory, but it filled Hugh with confidence. As the landscape changed, so did the seasons. Hugh witnessed the beauty of the wilderness in all its forms, from the vibrant greens of spring to the golden hues of autumn. Each scene was a reminder of the world's beauty and the privilege of experiencing it, even under such harsh conditions. Food was always a concern, and Hugh had to be creative in finding ways to sustain himself. He fished in the rivers, hunted small game with his bow and arrows, and gathered wild plants and berries. Each meal was a testament to his ability to live in harmony with the land. Despite the physical demands of his journey, Hugh's thoughts often turned to Bridger. He wondered what he would say to the young man when they finally met. Hugh's feelings had evolved over time. The anger and desire for revenge that had once consumed him had given way to a deeper understanding of human frailty and the capacity for forgiveness. One evening, as Hugh sat by a small fire, he reflected on his incredible journey. He had travelled through vast expanses of wilderness, survived a bear attack, and overcome betrayal. Yet, he had also experienced kindness from those he least expected. These experiences had changed him, shaping him into a man who understood the complexities of life and the importance of compassion. Hugh realized that his journey was about more than just survival or confronting those who had wronged him. It was about discovering the depths of his own strength and the value of forgiveness. This realization brought Hugh a sense of peace. No matter what happened when he found Bridger, Hugh knew he was ready to face it with grace and understanding. Chapter 14. Fort Kiowa. After many long weeks of travel, Hugh Glass finally saw a sign of civilization on the horizon. Fort Kiowa. Fort Kiowa was a trading post, a place where trappers and traders came to exchange furs for supplies. For Hugh, it represented a chance to rest, gather information, and plan his next steps in finding Jim Bridger. As Hugh approached the fort, people stared in disbelief. Word of his attack by a grizzly bear and subsequent abandonment had spread, and many believed him to be dead. Seeing him alive was nothing short of a miracle to them. Hugh, with his rugged appearance and determined gaze, walked into the fort, capturing the attention of everyone there. At the fort, Hugh was welcomed. People offered him food and a place to rest. They were eager to hear his story, to learn how he had survived against all odds. Hugh shared his tale, speaking of the bear attack, his struggle to survive in the wilderness, and his journey to reach Fort Kiowa. His audience listened in silence, captivated by his words. Hugh's story was not just one of survival. It was a testament to the human will to overcome even the most insurmountable challenges. As Hugh spoke, he also sought information about the expedition he had been part of, and more importantly, about Jim Bridger. He learned that the expedition had indeed passed through the area some time ago, but Bridger was no longer with them. According to the traders at the fort, Bridger had left, heading toward another fort further west. This news gave Hugh a new direction. His journey was not over. He had another destination to reach. Despite the urge to set out immediately in search of Bridger, Hugh knew he needed to rest and prepare. The people at Fort Kiowa, moved by his story, offered him supplies for his journey. They gave him food, a better quality weapon, and warm clothing. The kindness and generosity Hugh received at Fort Kiowa were a stark contrast to the betrayal he had experienced. It reminded him that, even in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, there were still people who valued honor and integrity. Hugh spent several days at Fort Kiowa, regaining his strength and planning his next move. He knew that finding Bridger would be difficult, but he was determined to see his quest through to the end. As he prepared to leave, the people at the fort wished him well, admiring his courage and resilience. Leaving Fort Kiowa, Hugh felt a mix of emotions. He was grateful for the help he had received, but he was also anxious about the journey ahead. The landscape was becoming more familiar, a sign that he was getting closer to his goal. With each step, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. His experiences had changed him, but they had also given him a clear understanding of what he needed to do. Chapter 15. Forgiveness over Vengeance. Hugh Glass's journey continued as he followed the trail leading to Jim Bridger, the second man who had abandoned him. His heart was heavy with anticipation and a mix of emotions he couldn't quite identify. The landscapes changed as he moved, but his determination remained as strong as ever. Finally, after days of travel, Hugh arrived at another fort where Jim Bridger was said to be staying. The fort was a bustling centre of activity, with people coming and going, trading goods and sharing stories. Hugh stepped into this lively scene, his eyes searching for Bridger among the faces in the crowd. When Hugh finally saw Bridger, time seemed to slow down. Bridger was younger and less experienced than Fitzgerald, and when he saw Hugh, his face turned pale with shock. He had believed Hugh was dead, a ghost from his past come back to haunt him. Hugh approached Bridger, his presence commanding the attention of those around them. The air was thick with tension, as people stopped to watch what would happen. Bridger stood frozen, waiting for Hugh to speak. "I'm alive, Bridger," Hugh said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You left me to die, but I survived." Bridger's eyes were filled with regret and fear. He stammered, trying to find the words to explain his actions, to apologize. Hugh listened, seeing the guilt in Bridger's young face. He realized then that Bridger had been scared and influenced by Fitzgerald's decision to leave him behind. As Hugh stood there facing Bridger, he felt the weight of his journey and the pain of his betrayal. He had every right to seek vengeance, to make Bridger pay for what he had done. Yet, as he looked into Bridger's eyes, Hugh felt something shift within him. He thought about the incredible journey he had undertaken, the struggles he had faced, and the people who had helped him along the way. Hugh realized that his survival was a testament to his strength and will to live, not a story of revenge. He had overcome impossible odds, and his story could inspire others to face their own challenges with courage and determination. Holding on to anger and seeking vengeance would not change what had happened. It would only serve to keep him trapped in the past. In that moment, Hugh made a choice. He chose forgiveness over vengeance. "I've come a long way to find you, Bridger," Hugh said. "Not to seek revenge, but to show you that I survived despite your actions. You have to live with what you did, but I forgive you." The crowd around them was silent, moved by Hugh's words. Bridger, tears in his eyes, nodded, overwhelmed by Hugh's decision to forgive him. Hugh turned and walked away, leaving Bridger to reflect on his actions and the mercy that had been shown to him. Chapter 16. A Legend Returns. After his long and harrowing journey, Hugh Glass made his way back to the frontier, a place he had left behind months ago. The news of his survival and incredible journey spread quickly among the trappers and traders. When people saw him, they could hardly believe their eyes. Here was Hugh Glass, the man who had been mauled by a bear, left for dead, and had survived against all odds. His story became the talk of the frontier, a tale of bravery, survival, and forgiveness that captivated everyone who heard it. As Hugh shared his story with those on the frontier, his reputation grew. People were amazed by his determination to live and his ability to forgive those who had wronged him. Trappers and Native American tribes alike spoke of Hugh Glass with respect and admiration. He had not only survived a bear attack and a brutal journey through the wilderness, but had also shown great strength of character. Hugh's tale was not just a story of survival, it was a lesson in resilience, the power of the human spirit, and the importance of compassion. His experience in the wilderness, his encounters with Native American tribes who helped him, and his decision to forgive the men who abandoned him were all parts of a story that resonated deeply with those who heard it. Word of Hugh Glass's journey spread far and wide, and he became something of a legend on the frontier. His story was told around campfires, in trading posts, and among the Native American tribes. People saw Hugh as a symbol of the untamed wilderness and the strength required to face its challenges. Hugh's return to the frontier also changed how he was seen by his peers. Before, he was respected as a skilled trapper and frontiersman, but now he was admired for his incredible will to survive and his capacity for forgiveness. His story inspired others, showing them that it was possible to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles and to choose forgiveness over revenge. Despite his legendary status, Hugh remained humble. He did not see himself as a hero. He was simply a man who had been tested by the wilderness and had managed to survive. He continued to share his story, not for fame or recognition, but to inspire others with his experiences and the lessons he had learned. As time went on, Hugh Glass's story became a part of the folklore of the American frontier. It was a tale that spoke to the challenges of the wilderness, the strength required to face them, and the human capacity for endurance and forgiveness. Hugh's journey was more than just an incredible tale of survival. It was a testament to the spirit of all those who ventured into the unknown, facing the dangers of the frontier with courage and determination. Hugh Glass's legacy is a reminder of the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity, to find strength in the face of danger, and to choose compassion over anger. His story continues to inspire those who hear it, a timeless tale of survival and humanity on the American frontier. Chapter 17. Reflections of a Survivor. After his extraordinary journey of survival and forgiveness, Hugh Glass found himself in a moment of quiet reflection. He had faced death, battled the wilderness, and come face to face with the men who had abandoned him. Yet, here he was, alive and filled with a deep understanding of life's fragile nature and the strength of the human spirit. Sitting by a peaceful river, Hugh thought about everything he had been through. The attack by the grizzly bear seemed like a lifetime ago, yet it was the event that set everything in motion. He remembered the pain, the desperation, and the sheer will to live that had driven him to crawl for miles, seeking help. Hugh reflected on the people he had met along the way, especially the Native American tribe that had taken him in and healed him. Their kindness and wisdom had been a turning point for him, teaching him not just how to survive, but how to live with respect for the natural world and its inhabitants. These encounters had enriched his life in ways he could never have imagined. The confrontation with Fitzgerald and Bridger had tested him in different ways. It was not the wilderness or wild animals that posed a threat, but the actions of fellow men. Forgiving them had been one of the hardest things Hugh had ever done, but it was also the most liberating. He realized that holding on to anger and seeking revenge would only poison his heart and prevent him from moving forward. As he looked back on his journey, Hugh understood that he had changed. He was no longer just a trapper and frontiersman. He was a survivor, a man who had looked death in the eye and lived to tell the tale. He had learned about the power of the human will, the importance of compassion, and the value of forgiveness. Hugh also thought about the future. His experiences had ignited a new sense of adventure within him. He knew there were more challenges to face and more mysteries of the wilderness to explore. But he also knew that he was ready for whatever came next. Having conquered death itself, he felt a sense of fearlessness and a desire to experience all that life had to offer. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the river, Hugh felt a deep sense of peace. He had survived one of the most incredible journeys a man could endure, and he had come out stronger on the other side. He looked forward to new adventures, not as a man seeking revenge, but as a man enriched by the lessons of survival, kindness, and forgiveness. Chapter 17 of Hugh Glass's story is not just a conclusion to his extraordinary tale, but a beginning of a new chapter in his life. It is a reflection on the lessons learned and how the experience changed him. Hugh's journey is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, there is always a path forward. Hugh Glass's reflections serve as an inspiration to all who hear his story. They remind us of the strength we all possess to overcome adversity, to find forgiveness in our hearts, and to continue exploring the vast and beautiful world around us. His story, rooted in the rugged landscape of the American frontier, continues to resonate with those who seek adventure, understanding, and a deeper connection to the world and the people in it.